I know you talked about it, we mentioned it, but to me, the whole concept of VMS is that they occur in groups, right?
Yeah, clusters,
in regions,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm sort of going back to the topic because I want people to understand that a lot of these gold or gold copper is actually part of the system, but it's just a sector or section of a VMS. Whether the VMS is like this, full, or it's half, or over time it's been bitten off somewhere and moved across, and there's remobilization of this and that.
Exactly.
But the key is there was a cooking system, which means it's fertile.
And that is a very good point. And I very much adopt the mineral systems approach to targeting anywhere. Like prior to running Warriedar, it's hard to change. We were called Nova not so long ago, so now we're Warriedar. But I ran a consultancy called Fathom for 15 years, and my approach is always to use the mineral systems model, determine what components need to have existed to generate your ore deposit. And so it's just a very logical way of thinking. Like, you need a pathway for the fluids, the gold-bearing fluids, say, to have got to that location. You need some sort of secondary shear with a larger volume of fluid in a smaller volume of rock. You need something to cause the gold to drop out of solution. You need something to cause it to stay there. And for me, as a geophysicist, not a geologist, it's a very logical approach to how you form an ore body in a certain spot. And that's the approach our team are using with the copper and the base metals as well as the gold. Like, what components were needed? Where are the key structures? Where are the rheology contrasts that might have allowed such deposits to form in the location? Where's the structural complexity? We've got fantastic data to allow us to target across this area. We know that the area is very fertile for gold and for base metals, so we've already ticked that box. We're not trying to establish whether the province is fertile. It is richly fertile. There are profitable producing mines all around us. Our goal is just to find where there is more gold and base metals within our own project area, knowing that there's been hardly any drilling. So it is a remarkable opportunity. We do need to manage it well. Like, there's so many targets, and so part of the acquisition process, I said to the team early on, like, we're not just going to acquire this and then go, okay, let's start targeting. So while we were doing all the admin, legal, the whole process of acquiring DC mines, at the same time we had the team working on the data, doing the targeting, ranking all the targets, working out what order we want to follow these targets up in, so that we have a nice systematic pipeline of targets and we can actually be releasing results throughout the year. And that was a criticism of the older Nova, and we were very aware of it. Just having our project in Nevada, a fantastic project, but the frequency between news, it was pretty long wavelength. And so now, by having the Australian project as well as the Nevada-based project, we've got the right balance of in our portfolio. We can focus on Australia now, and then when the snow melts and we can access Nevada, we can focus there. So it's a really great balance. I'm also not, like someone asked me recently, does this mean you're not interested in Nevada anymore? Absolutely not. The reason I became involved with the Nova in the first place was I worked as a consultant on the Nevada project, and I looked at it and a bit in a similar way to this Australian one. I went, wow, like, you are right next to a 10 million ounce producing mine. There's been hardly any drilling, but where there has been drilling, you've already established a 1 million ounce resource. And now, Warriedar, we've collected all the data. Like, it's been several years of geophysical acquisition, soil sampling, mapping. We've got these great targets defined that are ready to drill. The limitation in Nevada at the moment is we're going through a permitting process to allow us to drill where we want to drill. But that's in hand. We've got a great exploration manager on the ground in Nevada. So I see Nevada as a really, it's classic elephant country. Like, individual deposits can be 40 million ounces. So we want that potential blue sky, But for now, we're focused on drilling in Australia, and I think we can get some really solid runs on the board, in the next few months and really prove to our investors and to the market that this is a solid project, that these gold resources do continue at depth, and we're well funded to just continue drilling and do that. So,
I mean, when I look at that, and I guess a lot of investors look at that, and there's lots of dots, lots of drilling, and people might say, oh, this has been drilled like a Swiss cheese. But
yeah,
I do want to remind people that there's a lot of Swiss cheese projects that have come up with, another 1 million ounces. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And the Swiss cheese, you look at that and just take a depth slice off
that
drilling layer,
yeah.
Remove the top 40 metres, and you've actually got not much left at all in terms of where the drill holes have pierced the ground. So, it is great that we can drill deeper. We've got a second rig turning up next week, both RC rigs at the moment. We will get a diamond rig out there later in the year. We just want to optimise, obviously diamond drilling is more expensive, we need a bigger program, but we're building up what we're going to do with the diamond rig as we move through the RC program.
And do you see, structure, people always say structure plays a big role and things like that. Do you see, is there any major, being a geophysicist, and that's why I'm sort of asking the question, do you see any major structures where that has sort of added to your confidence, saying, hey, this is good plumbing,
Absolutely. So there's the main shear, but like with any, government geoscience maps, that the location of that main shear is not perfect. We have incredible government data, so it's not a criticism at all, but in delving deeper into the data, using the gravity, the magnetics, the EM, all the different data sets at our disposal, we've mapped out the structural framework, both the broad framework and then the detailed framework. And we know where these structures track. We know exactly where we want to follow a long strike from existing resources. Not all the structures have a contrast in every data set, so we've got to use multiple data sets. It's often difficult to map the contrast between a felsic granite and a felsic sediment, where you get from the granite to the greenstone. In some of the EM data, we're pulling out structures that we just couldn't see in the magnetics. So we now, having used all the data together, and that's always the best approach, we now have a really solid understanding of the structural framework. Structure is critical. It's essential for gold. It's also essential for any copper-based metal mineralisation. It's basically showing you where you want to look. And then, your classic, where is the structural complexity along these main first or second order structures? We've mapped that out well. We have a great, it's overused as well, that whole pipeline of targets, but it's true in our sense. We've got some priority 1 targets that we want to drill immediately. And I also believe and of course we need to do our budgeting and our planning, but exploration, you need these decision points along the way. We don't know what results we're going to get in the next few months. So I've said to the team, every time, every 2 or 3 months we have these workshops, we look at the results that we've got, we reassess, redesign our programs based on what we now know to be true about our ground. You can't plan a whole year or two's program. It's completely unrealistic. You need to change your direction depending on what results you've received to date, and that's exactly what we will do. We will continue drilling, but where we drill and what we focus on will very much depend on the results.